Picture yourself standing in Grandma's cozy kitchen, shelves lined with well-worn cookbooks, the scent of something warm and comforting in the air. Today, we're whisking you back in time to spotlight 10 legendary sandwiches that graced countless family tables across mid-century America. From the thrifty ingenuity of the Great Depression era to the creative boom of the post-war years, these timeless favorites have stories as rich as their flavors. If you're ready to revisit the days of handwritten recipes, vintage Tupperware, and a slower, more heartwarming approach to mealtime, stick around. Number 1. Pimento cheese sandwich. Mid-century American kitchens often boasted a container of homemade pimento cheese spread resting in the fridge, a testament to practical cooking habits and regional culinary pride. Grandmothers, particularly those in southern states, perfected this spread by blending grated cheddar cheese, diced pimentos from small glass jars, and a modest amount of mayonnaise or salad dressing. The pimentos, bright red and preserved in vinegar, added vibrant flecks of color that made each sandwich visually appealing. Some families preferred a sharper cheddar for a bolder flavor, while others toned it down with mild cheddar and a pinch of sugar. By the 1930s, pimento cheese was entrenched as a budget-friendly method of elevating sandwiches without breaking the bank, since even a small amount of the mixture went a long way. Baby boomers recall summertime lunches in cozy homes smelling faintly of melting cheese, as the spread could be served cold or lightly warmed on toast. During the 1940s and 1950s, local newspapers ran advertisements describing pimento cheese as a taste of the South, even in places well north of the Mason-Dixon line, attracting curious families with its creamy, tangy punch. School cafeterias sometimes offered small cups of pimento cheese alongside crackers, further endearing this spread to children who relished its rich texture. In the 1960s, when suburban grocery stores introduced a wider array of cheeses, inventive grandmothers experimented with blends, half cheddar, half Monterey Jack, or even a dash of feta to add salty complexity. The result was a concoction that varied from household to household. Some had a mild sweetness, while others practically tingled with black pepper and spices. By the 1970s, baby boomers who had grown up enjoying pimento cheese found themselves preparing the familiar recipe for their own children, making subtle changes to accommodate evolving taste buds. A handful of families added minced onions or relish, seeking extra crunch and flavor. The 1980s continued the tradition, though some cooks started using low-fat cheese or lighter dressings, hoping to replicate the creaminess of their grandmother's version without all the calories. Still, the beloved essence remained intact. A bright-hued, tangy spread, best enjoyed between two slices of soft bread, bringing forth an immediate sense of warmth and nostalgia. Stories of old Hollywood starlets endorsing cheese brands or black and white commercials, singing the praises of easy pimento meals, sometimes circulated among older relatives, contributing to the sandwich's timeless allure. Even in modern times, a single whiff of cheddar mingled with vinegary pimentos can transport grown adults back to a simpler era, where every family gathering or picnic hamper seemed to include a platter of pimento cheese sandwiches just waiting to be devoured. Number 2. Tuna melt sandwich. A close cousin of the classic tuna salad sandwich, yet distinct enough to claim its own legend, the tuna melt gained popularity in the 1950s and 1960s. Grandmothers recognized that a humble can of tuna offered both affordability and remarkable versatility, particularly valuable during leaner periods in American history, when families stretched proteins as far as possible. After draining the tuna, they would mix it with mayonnaise, finely chopped celery, minced onion, and perhaps a dash of lemon juice for brightness. But the defining trait of a tuna melt lay in the final step, layering the tuna mixture with a slice of cheese and then toasting or grilling the sandwich until the cheese bubbled. With cheddar and Swiss ranking among the top choices, many families living in suburban developments adored the sizzling aroma of a tuna melt browning on a stove. The sandwich often arrived on dinner tables alongside simple sides, like tomato soup or crisp potato chips, bridging the gap between a casual lunch and a more substantial evening meal. By the 1970s, children of the baby boomer generation reminisced about stepping off the school bus, crossing a well-kept lawn, and opening their front door to the mouth-watering scent of tuna melts cooking in a cast-iron skillet. Retro commercials on black and white televisions promoted tuna as a thrifty powerhouse of protein, frequently encouraging housewives to broil cheese on top for added punch. Some inventive grandmothers included pickles or diced bell peppers to amplify the crunch, catering to a new wave of taste preferences that leaned increasingly adventurous. By the 1980s, grocery stores expanded the tuna aisle with different varieties, chunk light, solid white, even flavored versions, encouraging families to try new twists. Yet the comforting essence remained the same: warm, cheesy tuna sealed between two toasted slices. A tuna melt hardly claimed the glamour of famed delicatessen offerings, but it appealed strongly to working-class families looking for speedy yet satisfying nourishment. The assembly line of homemade tuna melts often spanned multiple generations in the kitchen, with older relatives sprinkling black pepper onto the cheese, while younger ones carefully flipped the sandwiches. Memories of thick steam rising from the pan and the cheese stretching with each bite secured the tuna melt's place in the annals of grandmotherly cooking, a cherished dish that captured the unpretentious spirit of American mealtime. Number 3. Fried Bologna sandwich. Popular from the 1930s through the 1970s, the fried Bologna sandwich exemplified a resourceful approach to meal planning that resonated with numerous working-class and rural families. Bologna, a budget-friendly lunch meat, arrived neatly sliced from the local butcher or in mass-produced packaging at corner grocers. Grandmothers in older farmhouses and new suburban ranch homes alike often tossed a Bologna slice on a hot skillet until the edges curled, browning the exterior and intensifying its smoky, salty flavor. The sizzling aroma permeated many a kitchen on weekday mornings, creating a sense of comfort that perfectly suited the era's emphasis on hearty, uncomplicated fare. Some used mustard or ketchup as a simple condiment, while others slathered on mayonnaise or relish for a tangy contrast. Children of the baby boomer generation, leafing through black and white photo albums years later, often recall how that single fried slice of processed meat sparked excitement they couldn't quite explain. The 1950s and 1960s saw a proliferation of Bologna brands competing for prime shelf space, offering mild, garlic-infused, or even extra-thick versions. By the time the 1970s rolled around, the sandwich had evolved. A slice of American cheese might be melted on top, or a fresh tomato could be added if in season. Lightly toasting the bread in a pan with a sliver of butter became a signature flourish for certain grandmothers who strove to replicate a diner-like taste at home. The 1980s introduced microwaves to countless households, but many cooks insisted that frying was the only way to achieve the sandwich's signature crispy edges and slight char. Even families that rose to relative affluence often held onto their fried Bologna traditions, reminding younger generations of humbler beginnings. Nostalgic stories about sizzling slices and the comforting hum of an AM radio station in the background underscore the fried Bologna sandwich's lasting influence. Though overshadowed in modern food culture, it served as a symbol of thrifty ingenuity, where something as unremarkable as Bologna could, with a little heat and the right bread, transform into a beloved staple that spanned decades of family mealtimes. Number 4. Spam and pineapple sandwich. When World War II rationing limited fresh meat supplies, Spam quickly emerged as a canned alternative that families could store for lengthy periods without spoilage. By blending pork shoulder and ham, the brand created a uniquely salty, slightly sweet flavor. After the war ended, many grandmothers discovered they could dress up Spam to create sandwiches that felt exotic, particularly when combined with pineapple. This pairing reflected the emerging fascination with tropical themes in mid-century America. influenced by returning servicemen who had experienced the Pacific Theater and by the rising popularity of Hawaiian-inspired cuisine. Slices of Spam were often seared in a skillet until lightly browned, then topped with pineapple rings, canned in syrup to accentuate the sweet and salty interplay. In the 1950s, the sandwich might be brushed with a bit of mustard or a splash of the pineapple syrup for moisture, then packed into lunch pails or served with potato salad at backyard barbecues. Older baby boomers remember seeing bright posters in grocery windows extolling the virtues of canned meat, promising convenience and affordability. By the 1960s, tiki culture swept through suburban neighborhoods, manifested in themed parties and yard decor, fueling the appeal of Spam and pineapple in new recipes. Grandmothers who hosted weekly bridge clubs or welcomed neighbors for Sunday potlucks frequently highlighted this sandwich as an intriguing change from the usual ham or turkey. The 1970s introduced more specialized cookware and new marinade ideas, prompting some to glaze the Spam with brown sugar or teriyaki sauce before layering it on bread. Although nutritional trends in the 1980s began questioning processed meats, many families still defended the Spam and pineapple sandwich as a nostalgic comfort that had seen them through tough times. Children hanging around the kitchen, curious about the sizzling pink slices and the whiff of caramelizing pineapple, formed memories they would later recount with a mixture of amusement and fondness. For them, it was inseparable from recollections of loud floral shirts, coconut-themed parties, and Grandma humming softly while flipping Spam in a cast-iron skillet, bridging the gap between strict economic necessity and the whimsical allure of faraway shores. Number 5, potted meat and pickle sandwich. While deviled ham attracted plenty of fans, potted meat, another canned spread, also gained traction from the 1930s onward among thrifty families seeking a shelf-stable protein. Processed from various meats, finely ground into a paste, potted meat had a richer, sometimes fattier texture than deviled ham. The dense spread needed only a minor boost, perhaps mayonnaise or a spiced sauce, to morph into a sandwich filling. Grandmothers who lived through the Great Depression appreciated how a single small can could feed multiple children if paired with ample bread and a crisp garnish like pickles or onions. In the 1940s and 1950s, lunch counters in smaller towns occasionally featured a potted meat and pickle sandwich, praising its convenience and low cost. Baby boomers growing up in the 1960s remember rummaging through pantries, spotting familiar metal cans with bold labels that promised instant lunch. Typically, the mixture was spread onto soft bread, sometimes with sliced sweet pickles for an extra tang. Savory relish, mustard, or even ketchup might be stirred in to counter the spread's inherent saltiness. By the 1970s, brand competition in canned meats expanded, offering different blends or seasonings, though the basic premise remained: a low-price product that delivered protein in a pinch. Certain grandmothers with extended families under one roof swore by potted meat for quick lunches when they couldn't make a run to the grocery store, leaning on older survival strategies that valued canned goods as a safety net. As the 1980s brought microwave meals and faster dining options, potted meat's relevance declined, but many older relatives clung to nostalgic associations. Indeed, a single bite of potted meat and pickle sometimes evoked memories of simpler days spent rummaging through Grandma's cabinets, listening to old radio dramas, or flipping through a Sears catalog spread out on a kitchen table. It might never have reached the glamorous status of more gourmet fillings, yet it still stands as a historical footnote in mid-century culinary survival, bridging necessity and the unwavering desire for a quick, filling sandwich. Number 6, liverwurst and onion sandwich. Liverwurst, derived mainly from pork liver and spices, emerged from old European traditions that many American families carried forward into the 20th century. By the 1930s and 1940s, deli and butcher shops offered this sausage variety to immigrant communities who cherished its savory, iron-rich properties. Grandmothers with German or Eastern European heritage preserved the custom, of spreading sliced or mashed liverwurst on rye bread, frequently topping it with raw onions for a pungent, textural bite. In the 1950s, as new suburbs blossomed across the country, families of diverse backgrounds often traded sandwich ideas, leading to more widespread appreciation of liverwurst. Baby boomers might recall the distinctive odor, earthy, slightly metallic, with a hint of spice, wafting through the kitchen whenever a fresh tube of liverwurst was cut open. Some households favored an additional smear of mustard to offset the strong flavor, while others added pickles or crisp lettuce. By the 1960s, grocery stores began marketing pre-sliced liverwurst in bright packaging, touting its high protein content, though picky eaters sometimes needed convincing. In the 1970s and 1980s, certain health movements extolled the mineral benefits of organ meats, ironically aligning with families who'd been enjoying liverwurst for decades. Nonetheless, the aroma and robust flavor remained an acquired taste for many. Grandmothers who championed this sandwich insisted that a fresh onion slice was key, offering sweet sharpness that complemented the creamy livery spread. Neighborhood potlucks might have included small, bite-sized versions of the liverwurst and onion sandwich, designed for curious but tentative guests. A single whiff could instantly transport an older relative back to bustling markets in decades past, hearing vendors call out daily specials and seeing wooden barrels filled with pickled vegetables. Today, the memory of biting into a liverwurst and onion sandwich, eyes watering just a bit from the onion's sting, still resonates as a testament to the old-world flavors that shaped countless family meals and formed gastronomic bridges between American-born children and their European immigrant grandparents. Number 7. Salmon patty sandwich. Canned salmon played a notable role in 20th century American kitchens, especially when fresh fish proved difficult to source. By mixing canned salmon with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasoning, grandmothers transformed it into salmon patties they could fry in shallow oil. The resulting crispy exterior locked in a moist, flavorful interior. Throughout the 1940s, when coastal fisheries ramped up production, salmon became more accessible to inland households. For many families, salmon patties were a means of celebrating seafood on a budget. Once cooled, these patties often landed between slices of bread, with lettuce, tomato, and sometimes a dab of tartar sauce or mayonnaise, evolving into a salmon patty sandwich. In the 1950s and 1960s, baby boomers recall the appealing crackle as patties hit the hot skillet, accompanied by the soft hiss of steam. The subtle fish aroma, combined with a whiff of pepper or dill, signaled dinner was around the corner. In areas where Catholic families observed meatless Fridays, salmon patties provided a tasty alternative to standard fish fillets, ensuring variety in a weekly routine. As the 1970s arrived, grandmothers flipped patties with well-practiced skill, mindful of not letting them fall apart or over-browning them. Some used leftover mashed potatoes to extend the mixture, reflecting a deep-rooted thrifty ethic. During the 1980s, as fresh produce sections expanded, families added more vegetables and fresh herbs to the patty mixture for a nutritional boost. Whether served hot from the pan or chilled the next day, the salmon patty sandwich remained a nostalgic treat, often evoking images of small kitchens filled with crocheted potholders, checkered curtains, and well-worn cast-iron pans. The unique blend of flavors, mildly fishy salmon, toasty breadcrumbs, and crisp lettuce, struck a chord with older relatives who sometimes reminisced about stretching food during wartime rationing or leaning on the reliability of canned goods when fresh supply chains faltered. Each bite encompassed the spirit of determination, illustrating how families across multiple states could conjure a satisfying sandwich from a can, a few pantry staples, and a bit of frying know-how. Number 8. Sloppy Joe sandwich. Unlike most of the simpler cold-serve sandwiches of earlier decades, the Sloppy Joe boasted a saucy, savory, and slightly messy profile that delighted children and adults in the mid-20th century. Ground beef or turkey formed the base, browned with onions before being simmered in a tomato-based sauce, sweetened by ketchup or sugar, and sharpened by Worcestershire vinegar or mustard. The 1930s and 1940s saw home cooks adopt variations of this hearty recipe, sometimes called loose meat sandwiches or tavern sandwiches, reflecting a cultural appetite for quick, filling meals. Grandmothers recognized that a pound of ground meat could feed multiple hungry grandchildren if stretched with sauce. By the 1950s, chain restaurants and local diners offered their own signature Sloppy Joe styles, often served on soft hamburger buns that soaked up the bright red sauce, a style imitated by families at home. Baby boomers recall newspapers running adverts for seasoning packets designed to simplify the cooking process, claiming that busy mothers could serve the entire dish in under 15 minutes. In the 1960s, the Sloppy Joe was a favorite at block parties and social fundraisers, featuring large aluminum pans of the mixture kept warm over hot plates or small stoves. The 1970s ushered in a sense of experimentation, with some households adding diced green peppers or mushrooms to the sauce, while others substituted barbecue sauce for a spicier bite. Gen Xers who visited grandparents in the 1980s might have found that the recipe remained firmly entrenched in vintage cookbook traditions, occasionally updated with low-fat meat or less sugar. The name Sloppy Joe felt playful, evoking an informal, carefree atmosphere where a bit of sauce dripping onto your fingers or plate was no cause for alarm. For many families, it symbolized unity around the dinner table, forging bonds through mutual enjoyment of a messy, mouth-watering indulgence. Grandmothers, adept at cooking for crowds, enjoyed making a giant pot of the mixture on a weekend, ensuring an easy go-to meal for the next few days. With each ladleful, they passed on a legacy of resourceful cooking that showcased how modest ingredients, combined with bold seasoning, could yield a memorable sandwich that remains an unshakable part of American mealtime nostalgia. Number 9. Bologna and cheese salad sandwich. Distinct from a simple slice of bologna between bread, the bologna and cheese salad sandwich required finely chopping bologna and mixing it with grated cheese, mayonnaise, and often a bit of relish or chopped pickles. This spread-like filling bore some resemblance to pimento cheese, but with the distinct tang of bologna as its base. The practice of grinding bologna into small pieces was already popular in the 1940s and 1950s, as it allowed thrifty cooks to make the most of lunch meat trimmings. Grandmothers might pass the slices through a hand crank grinder, reminiscent of simpler times when electric appliances were not always a given. The 1960s continued to see families embrace this cheese salad, often placing it on crackers for quick snacks or stuffing it into white bread for lunches. Baby boomers recall rummaging around the fridge, hoping to find leftover bologna spread stored in a glass Pyrex bowl, ready for a fast sandwich fix. Some might swirl in mustard or hot sauce for additional zing, while others layered in diced celery for crunch. By the 1970s, commercial brands introduced pre-ground bologna salads, though many grandmothers remained loyal to homemade versions, claiming it tasted fresher and allowed for better control of sweetness or saltiness. Packed lunches in the 1980s sometimes included this sandwich, wrapped tightly in wax paper next to an apple or a bag of chips. Although overshadowed by more conventional ham or turkey deli slices, the bologna and cheese salad sandwich built a niche following among those who found its combination deeply comforting. The mild cheddar or American cheese inside gave the spread a creamy backbone, while the bologna contributed a distinctive tang that set it apart from deviled ham or other canned spreads. Each bite recalled an era when families survived on balanced budgets, repurposed every scrap of food, and refused to sacrifice taste in the process. For grandchildren who watched Grandma skillfully operate her grinder, turning mundane pink slices into a cohesive, flavorful mix, it became a small lesson in kitchen ingenuity, a hallmark of life in vintage America, where every leftover held culinary potential. Number 10. Reuben sandwich. Though often associated with Jewish delis and big city eateries, the Reuben found its way onto many home tables once grandmothers in the 1950s began replicating restaurant favorites using local ingredients. Stacked with corned beef, or sometimes pastrami, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, and Russian dressing, all griddled together on rye bread, this sandwich offered a bold meld of flavors that appealed to adventurous palates. As baby boomers recall, rye bread's distinctive caraway seeds and the tang of sauerkraut introduced exotic elements seldom seen in typical school lunches. Still, the presence of sliced corned beef, reminiscent of holiday feasts or special occasions, elevated the Reuben into a treat that stood out from everyday options. In the 1960s, some families replaced corned beef with leftover pot roast or turkey, creating variations like the Rachel, though the original remained a point of pride for connoisseurs. Grandma's approach typically involved buttering the rye bread and frying each side carefully, ensuring the cheese melted thoroughly and the sauerkraut warmed evenly. Television commercials in the 1970s portrayed delis touting the authenticity of their Reubens, inspiring home cooks to search out the best sauerkraut, the most robust Russian dressing, and premium corned beef in local markets. By the 1980s, brand-name salad dressings offered convenience for those lacking time to prepare their own spreads, fueling a wave of quick Reuben nights in smaller households. Grandmothers adept at multi-step cooking found that the process required careful assembly and heat management to avoid soggy bread or cold pockets of sauerkraut. Children captivated by the Reuben's different textures, soft cheese, crispy bread edges, tangy cabbage, often recalled the moment they first tasted it. Such a sandwich, bridging old-world deli culture and new suburban lifestyles, captured the evolving tapestry of American food. Sitting at a laminate kitchen table with the tang of warm sauerkraut in the air, families might trade stories of grandparents from overseas or talk about the black and white movies that depicted bustling city diners, each memory accentuated by the hearty, soulful bite of the Reuben.